Welcome to this video, to this lesson on identifying toxic relationships. This is part of a series or part of a bonus module, of course, but in and of itself, a valuable video. Now, a valuable lesson. Why? Why is it a valuable lesson? Because relationships are so important in life. Relationships are so necessary in life. Relationships allow us to grow, to cultivate a deeper sense of self, to cultivate a broader awareness of self. They give us hope in a world where sometimes there is no hope. But we can find ourselves in difficult situations at times. We can find ourselves in relationships that are not conducive to our health and our well-being. And in this space, we find ourselves adhering to patterns, habitual patterns of relational behavior that stems generally from our childhood, coping strategies that we have developed at a young age with respect to how to relate to people, to our loved ones, to our primary caregivers. And we bring these dynamics, these patterns of relating into our adult relationships, and they do not always serve us. In fact, most of the times they do not. These unhealthy patterns of behavior do not serve us, and they're not healthy for us. And the reality is that as adults, moving into relationship and being in an intimate relationship and intimately relating to another, it is so important that we do the work on ourselves, that we are present to ourselves. When I say do the work, what does that mean? It means exploring self. And if we look at the conscious warrior model, one of the key tenets of the conscious warrior model is to be an explorer. So for a man to be a healthy man, he must explore the chasms of his being, his belief systems, his ideologies, the cultural nuances and norms, his ideas about life, his thought paradigms, himself, his relationships, everything. But that doesn't just apply to men, of course, it applies to women as well. It definitely applies to women. Whoop, minus the beep, sorry about that. So we begin to connect to ourselves in a whole, holistic, endearing, healthy way when we are able to deeply respect our being, when we are able to recognize, are we healthily relating in life? Because if we are not, these experiences compound and eventually lend themselves to us becoming disorientated, unhealthy people, disconnected, unhealthy people. So this lesson is about toxicity or a lack of health in relationship or in relating. And it could mean that you are behaving in a toxic manner, or your partner is. So there'll be about 12 signs that I'll go through. It could be 11, 12, 13. But there'll be, and of course there's a lot more, there's many more, but these are pertinent 11 to 13 to 14 pertinent signs that the relationship you are in, that you are immersing, that you are functioning in to some degree is not healthy. So we can use the words interchangeably, health or unhealthy and toxic. Toxic's a very powerful word, so be careful with the word toxic, yeah, because it is very, very powerful word. But in some cases, people experience toxicity in relationship. The reality is that we are relational beings. We are connected beings. We wish to be in relation to one another. And we're social beings. And this is real. we come from different upbringings, differing personal dispositions. The way we view the world, the way we operate is different from one person to the other. Our belief systems are somewhat different. Our experiences, the interpretations of those experiences are different. Therefore, we must work together when we are relating. And if we're not working together, we're working against each other. And when we're working against each other, we're going to cause friction. And in that friction, we're going to cause tension. In that tension, fear cultivates. Frustration, anger, negative emotions cultivate. And they become prominent in our relating. And this isn't healthy. This isn't healthy for us at all. So we want to understand that toxicity is a relative perception as well. And it may be less about having a toxic partner, more about the conflicting survival strategies in the wake of a broken or inconsistent childhood relationship that we may implement. And I spoke to that a little bit earlier. So what does that mean? That means that we carry over these inconsistent or null and void coping strategies as a child, and we bring them into our adult relationships, and they don't really fit, and they'll conflict with the other. They'll conflict with the other's coping strategies. And we need to understand that we have generally two basic extremes in attachment. So I'm speaking to attachment in how we relate, okay? And that our coping strategies are linked intimately with this, with respect to how we deal, how we cope with stress, how we cope with anxiety, how we cope with a differing opinion or a differing belief system or a clash of ideology. Because it can threaten us, because we feel that if our partner, my partner is clashing with me, whoa, what's going on? Like, am I doing something wrong? Are they going to break up with me? Is this relationship going to end? Is my love going to be lost? Am I going to plummet into some form of hell or deprivation? We have these sometimes unconscious, sometimes conscious feelings of annihilation even as well. So we have to be able to connect to these attachment styles, so to speak. So one will generally cling and protest, and the other will withdraw and disengage. And these are two very common extreme coping strategies. And we can equate this to the masculine and feminine dichotomy. The masculine wishes to create space, disengage, disconnect. The feminine the feminine within wants to be very confrontational, wants an answer now, not so much an answer, but wants resolution now, wants to deal with the issue now, wants to be very attached to that situation, understand it, connect to it, feel it, be with it. We have to understand that our coping strategies are different. And sometimes we'll have very similar coping strategies in relationship, but that doesn't mean they won't clash, because we'll come from a different disposition, yeah? And what happens is when these two attachment styles come together, they're like magnets, and sometimes intensely drawn to each other, and other times repulsed and polarized. So it's about you observing yourself in this situation, how you behave as a starting point, okay? And of course, how does your partner behave? So let's look at some signs that you're in a relationship with a toxic person, or that you perhaps are acting unhealthily in the relationship as well, because of previous conditioning, because of the way you've interpreted certain life events, because of the way you've been brought up, because perhaps you've experienced trauma or suffering, and so has the other person. Now, I want to be very clear about something. There is no rigid resolution to being with or being involved in a toxic relationship. And what I mean by that is that, let's say you are in a toxic relationship and you identify that, wow, I'm really in an unhealthy relationship. Does that mean you need to end the relationship? Not necessarily. It's very much a personal choice, but please know this, that our greatest and deepest fears and challenges and pains often lead to the most profound growth and the most exciting opportunities for expansion of self. But there are so many variables that influence that. And we'll speak to that in another lesson. But just know that the choice you make around this, or the choices you make around this, or that you both collaboratively ideally would make around this, are really going to be dependent on the growth of you. And we'll speak to this and the growth of your partner, but we'll speak to this in conscious relationships and identifying conscious relationships and what an evolved conscious relationship looks like. And we'll go into that in that lesson. But let's start with the first sign. And so I'll interchangeably say you or your partner, but know that I mean both or one or. one of each. So they put you down. They're consistently negating your worth. They are putting you down in an argument. They are demeaning you. They will discredit you. They will discredit your feelings. You may discredit their feelings. And there's consistency in this. They will call you names that are hurtful. It may be rude names. It could be, they may swear at you. They may allude to your incompetence in a certain area. They may tease you incessantly. This is not healthy. Know that when your partner or you are putting your partner down, you are demeaning them, you are demoralizing them, you are not uplifting them, and you're not able to express to them in a healthy way that something that they are being or doing does not align with you. That's a really strong sign that you're not in a healthy relationship. Let's be really, really clear about that. Next sign, projection, blaming and shaming. Do you blame and shame your partner for everything? Are you disowning your actions? Are you not taking ownership of who you are? Men do this really well, and men do this often. People do it, of course, but men do this quite often. Are you not respecting the fullness of who you are? Are you not respecting your partner? Is your partner blaming you for everything that goes wrong in their life? Are they shaming you? Does your partner not take responsibility for their actions, for their thoughts, for their feelings? Do they not take ownership of who they are? Have they got a perfectionist attitude, and do they place that on you? Feel into that. Do they have this everything that I do and everything that I am must be in perfect alignment, whatever that may be for them? And do they then project that and have that same rigid expectation on you? And it's consistent. These signs that we're going through, the underlying element is consistency. Consistency is one of the greatest tools we have access to, one of the greatest technologies we have access to as human beings. It can work for us, it can work against us. But consistency will always demonstrate proficiency. So if you're consistently externalizing, projecting, and blaming, you'll become very, very efficient at that. Why do we project? We project because we're scared. We project because the ego is in fear of losing control. The ego would far rather blame something or someone outside of itself than assume the responsibility for itself. It becomes to some degree, narcissistic, self-absorbed, deeply self-absorbed protocol or expression. So observe that. Are you blaming? Is your partner blaming? Manipulation is the next sign. Which is an unhealthy, dark, feminine trait. It doesn't mean it's limited to females, of course. It's just a feminine expressive trait, dark, unhealthy. Manipulation. Do you manipulate, or does your partner manipulate the situation to get their way? And therefore, as a natural byproduct, inconsiderate of your feelings, inconsiderate of your vantage point, inconsiderate of your perspective, inconsiderate of who you are. Do they sulk? Do they give you the silent treatment? Do they make you feel guilty or otherwise try or attempt to manipulate you when they don't get their way? Manipulation is the complete opposite of love, of real encompassing love, of what love is supposed to be. Relationships are about understanding each other, empathizing, being compassionate, connecting to each other, amongst many other things. And just because your partner doesn't get their own way doesn't mean they should pout or they should attempt to pressure you in an unhealthy way to get what they feel they want or need from the relationship. This becomes a very self-absorbed, very one-way relationship. If your partner's forcing you to second guess yourself constantly, and they are almost forcing you or allow you to lose sight of your own vision, your own goals, your own purpose, your own dreams to satisfy their needs. If your partner can't respect you and what you need, potentially time to reevaluate the relationship, at least have a conversation. And we'll talk about communication in a moment. But a communication piece around that will definitely be necessary. Next sign. Inconsistent. Remember we said about consistency. They're inconsistent in their promises. They're inconsistent in who they are. They're inconsistent in what they say and what they do. There is a disparity and a disconnection between what they are saying and what they are doing. And this is consistent, yeah? So they are inconsistent in keeping their promises. And they hurt you. They hurt your feelings. They disregard your feelings as a process. If you don't trust your partner, if you don't have faith in your partner's word, if you do not trust their integrity and their authenticity because of the false promises they are making, it becomes deeply challenging to connect to. And we will start to notice that we are in an unhealthy relationship if we are in that space, in an unhealthy relationship. So inconsistency in their promises, in their word, so important, so deeply important. Next sign, they dismiss your emotional being. Again, unfortunately, or fortunately, it is what it is. The masculine often does this, or men there's a cultural nuance surrounding men that we are not effective at listening and effective at being open and effective to just being present, and we dismiss the emotions or the emotional body of the feminine, of the female, that has no value in this world, and it's completely incorrect. It's so far removed from what reality needs to be and what the balance needs to be between masculine and feminine expression. There's nothing worse when you're trying to express yourself to your partner and they completely discredit what you're saying. And when there's consistency in this, and their body language, their mannerisms, they're rolling their eyes, there's heavy sighs, they're telling you, they're trying to find a solution for you, ignoring your feeling state. They dismiss your feeling or your opinion or your belief system, and they just say that you are wrong, overtly, you're wrong. Stop thinking like that, just stop. When that behavior is consistent, it's demonstrating that that person does not care about your well-being and does not care about you, does not value you as a human being, does not really believe in what you have to offer. That's tough and that's unhealthy. Like, I've got to refrain, I've got to stop myself because I almost want to go into what a conscious relationship is. And I'm going to do a full lesson on this, on the consciousness of a relationship and the openness of a relationship and what that actually means. And sure signs that you're in a conscious relationship and how to cultivate that. But right now we're speaking to toxicity or a lack of health in relationship, a lack of healthy relating, yeah? If your partner, next sign, if your partner is narcissistic, self-absorbed and selfish, if they only care about their feelings at any expense and will hurt others or you to ensure that they are safe or they feel content or they feel happy or they are satisfied with respect to their goals and their dreams, and they're narcissistic in that way. And there's many attributes to a narcissist. I mean, narcissists, for example, if you are vulnerable with your partner and open with your partner and they use that against you consistently, and they are using that vulnerability, that openness, perhaps you shared something with them from your past that you weren't proud of, that you worked through, that you moved through with respect to shame and guilt, and they will bring that up and they will use that against you in an argument or in disagreement. If that's consistent, that can be a tendency to have a narcissistic traits. But to be self-absorbed, to not consider you in their decision-making, that form of narcissism, that self-absorbed, selfish behavior, not healthy. Begin to move away from that and notice that in your relationship. Are they considering you in their decision-making? Are they considering you in their thought processes? Are they sharing with you their depth of character, their depth of self? Next sign. You're almost forced in the dynamic of your relationship to just question everything you do. And when you question everything you do, it's not healthy. You're constantly stressed because you are questioning who you are, how you behave. It's like you're walking on eggshells and you don't want to do anything to upset them. And while you're supposed to grow and learn with your loved one, no one should try or attempt to change you or transform you to fit their ideal mold of what a partner should be. There needs to be a level of acceptance and just connection to who you actually are, to the core of who you are. Just because your partner doesn't know how to handle an argument or know how to communicate doesn't mean you should second guess your standards or your character. If your partner has unhealthy coping strategies, it doesn't mean that you need to be second guessing you, but you also need to be observing yourself as well, of course. So I mentioned this at the beginning, but I'll mention it again. Reality is what we're speaking to here is we're opening up to when I'm mentioning these traits or these signs, you're being mindful of yourself and you're being mindful of your partner as well. That's really very important. Yeah. Authenticity. Authenticity is next. If you can't be yourself, your true, authentic, integral, congruent self in front of your partner, and you can't express yourself how you wish to in that moment because there is a fear of being judged or critiqued or being abused or causing friction or tension, you need to be looking at the dynamic of the relationship and the quality of the relationship that you're in. If you don't have, because what effectively that lends itself to is that there's a lack of deep trust in the relationship. And for any relationship to be effective and for any relationship to be successful, to be loving, to be endearing, to be connected, to be open, to be beautiful, to be soulful, there needs to be trust. There needs to be a deep, deep trust. And there needs to be a surrender. And surrender can only occur with trust. And if you can't be yourself around your partner, then you can't trust them and you can't surrender to them. And you can't be vulnerable to them. You have lost aspects of a relationship that are so integral to the health of any relationship and so integral to our own growth. Let's be very clear about that as well. I mean, if you can't be the best version of yourself, or if your partner doesn't motivate you or inspire you rather to be the best version of yourself in that relationship, and they make you feel insecure and they draw you down when you be yourself or aspects of yourself that they may not like a shadow aspect of self. So this is really intimately linked to the shadow. Like if you can't express your shadow, if you can't express, and once obviously your shadow becomes conscious, it's no longer a shadow, so to speak. But if you can't express those negative versions of self, those versions of self that you don't really resonate with, that are harmful or that hurt you or that you're not super proud of, that you just are not content with because you're going to be judged harshly and there's a fear around that, you need to be looking at the nature and the health and the dynamic of the relationship, yeah? Really, really important. If you're feeling unloved and insecure in the relationship, it's time to look at the relationship, like really look at the relationship. Next sign. Your partner or you lack emotional intelligence. And the simplicity of this is that you cannot regulate your emotions. You're constantly aggressive, or you're extreme in your behavior, you're extreme in your emotional expression, or your partner is. And they also cannot connect to you. They cannot pick up on your emotional state and your emotional being. They're oblivious to that. That doesn't necessarily mean you're in a toxic relationship. But what it does mean is that you're in an unhealthy relationship that really is not flourishing. It's not thriving. It's maybe just surviving. And that's sad. Like, I don't understand why anyone would want to be. And I ask you this question. Do you want to be in a relationship where you're not flourishing, where you're just surviving, where you're just getting through, where you're just making it? We have one opportunity at this life. That's irrespective of whether you believe in multiple lives and past lives and reincarnation. You may, but you still only have an opportunity. Every moment is an opportunity to evolve and expand. But we have one opportunity in this life to expand and grow, and that's the whole lifetime. And by coming from that place, we're recognizing the intrinsic value of this life. We're not just what's the word? Blasé, but we'll use the word blasé, but that's not the word I'm really looking for. But we're not just blasé, there's a better word. We're not blasé with this life. Oh, we have multiple lives. I'll be reincarnated next life. I'll make it work then. No. We are valuing this life. And when we lack emotional intelligence, we are lacking our ability to connect to another. and connect to ourselves. We have to look at the relationship in that way. Like if that's occurring, we need to grasp that, understand that. Next sign. Problems are never resolved. Problems are ongoing. We're experiencing the same problems over and over again. The same arguments, the same disagreements, the same disconnection points are just occurring over and over again. And when you're in a relationship with a toxic partner, this happens often. And while you might want to give your partner the benefit of the doubt, continuing to have these arguments over and over again can completely tarnish your relationship and be spiritually, physically, emotionally, psychologically draining, and you really begin to lose in the relationship. You're losing in the dynamic. It's hectic. It's just fucking crazy. Like when I say crazy, you're going to bed with tension in your stomach. You're going to bed with tension and pain in your heart. You're not resolving your arguments. You're not resolving your tension points. You're not getting to the core of these disagreements and these disconnection points. And if this is happening consistently, you're more than likely in a toxic relationship. Next sign. If your partner is not looking after their health, their mental health, their emotional health, their spiritual health, their psychological health. But let's just focus on physical health as an example. If your partner is choosing to not focus on their physical health and they are not allowing themselves to engage in healthy practices, whether it be nutrition, whether it be movement, whether it be the environment they expose themselves to. If you or your partner are not conscious or aware of healthy practices for yourself, for your body, for your mind, for your soul, for your emotional self, if you're not nurturing yourself and you're almost in a destructive mode or you're self-sabotaging yourself, it's an indication that there is a lack of self-worth at a core issue unconsciously. This can destroy your relationship. It destroys the individual and destroys the dynamic of the relationship. Are you in a toxic relationship? Not necessarily, but you're potentially in a very unhealthy relationship because those efforts, because they're efforts, those actions, those experiences compound and they will affect you and they will affect your partner. And it is intrinsically linked to self-worth and self-value. And we're going to do a whole lesson on self-worth and self-value as well. And the importance of self-worth and self-value. Yeah, so that's an important sign to observe. Very important sign. If your partner is losing themselves in unhealthy practices for self, it's something to really look at deeply, actually. Next one, you don't have respect for your partner. Like if you don't revere and respect your partner. And this is almost linked to narcissism. This is actually linked to narcissism as well, but we're just talking very specifically to reverence and respect. Like if you cannot respect them for who they are and how they show up in the world, who they've been, what they've done, how they present themselves, the love that they share, the way they love you, the way they care for you, if you cannot respect and understand and acknowledge that and really revere that in the individual, if you don't revere your partner, you're in an unhealthy relationship. There is no time now for mediocre relationships, beautiful people. There is no time for bullshit, basic relationships. We do not wish to survive anymore. We want to thrive. If you are having an okay relationship, it's unhealthy. If you're having an okay relationship, it's toxic. It needs to be growing, evolving. Yes, you need to be challenged in your relationship, but there needs to be deep respect for one another, deep respect for your own processes, deep respect for your own growth, deep respect for your own being. And I mean deep respect for you and for your partner and for what they are going through, and then show up for them in that way. Like really, really show up for them in that way. Completely show up for them. And you're respecting them. You're respecting who they are. Now, if their actions are hurting you or their actions, you can still respect them as a person, but you have to create boundaries for yourself as well. Know that. That's very important. But you can still revere and respect and trust them. The last sign is if your partner or you have not worked through any trauma that you've experienced and any old patterning that is showing up in your life and is disrupting your life, is disrupting your relationships, is disrupting your ability to communicate effectively and to be present and to love openly, and you're coming from a place of scarcity when it comes to love, you're in an unhealthy relationship. If your partner is doing the same, you're in an unhealthy relationship. If you have not dealt with your trauma of past, if you've not dealt with your childhood issues, your attachment issues, if you've not dealt with the way you move through relationship, and if you've not dealt with observing the fact that many of your relationships have broken down and suffered, and you have not observed why, if you've not observed the relationship you have with yourself, how you treat yourself, how you feel about yourself, if you're not aware of that, and if you're not in healthy relationship with yourself, chances are you will be in an unhealthy relationship with self, which means you will be in an unhealthy relationship with your partner in your relationship. So there's some signs that you are in an unhealthy or potentially toxic relationship. And the action steps or the posturing that would naturally come from here is to communicate this with your partner. And it can be difficult, especially if you're in a relationship with a narcissist. It can be really difficult. It can be extremely painful, actually. So communication is the first protocol, is the first step. Actually, no, communication, yes, but communication with self. Asking self these questions, sitting in stillness and silence, creating space for self to observe, to feel into, to be with some of these signs, and do they apply to you in your life? And then is to have a very open communication with your partner. And if the relationship is not serving both of you for the growth of your partner and yourself, then perhaps it's time to end the relationship before it becomes very ugly. Or if there's deep love there and there's acknowledgement of this and you're both willing to move through these pain points because there's so much growth on the other side of that. And if you can commit openly to that, vulnerably to that, authentically to that, then that may be the path you take. But that's a very personal choice. And of course, there are many reasons why that may or may not occur. Wishing you many blessings on your journey. Excited to see you in the next lessons. And of course, be true to yourself. Believe in who you are. And know that if you're not growing, you are dying and you're stagnant in your posturing. And guess what the great news is? It's a choice to wish to grow and expand. And you have that choice now and always. Many blessings on your journey. One is always glad to be of service. Thank you so much.